We are gathered together to discuss the subject of marine debris, one of the most serious issues affecting ocean health. But why marine debris? After all, the primary reason we're all here in Newport is for a sailboat race, the most demanding sailboat race in the world. The reason is that we've been listening to our sailors and their surprise at the incredible amount and diversity of marine debris that they have encountered during the race. They are literally our canaries in the coal mine. They're seeing things that those of us on land cannot see. They're warning us of a danger that we must take note of. Why do we care? Marine debris is not just unsightly and potentially hazardous to navigation, as the sailors found in the Straits of Malacca. It also has the potential to affect the food web in the ocean, the most important web of life on the planet. Both Volvo and Sail Newport, the host port here, felt that this was an important issue that we could focus on to affect change. If we can make this an issue that identifies the sailing community with improving in a very important environmental issue in the world, we will have accomplished a great deal. Together, we have gathered an extraordinary list of speakers from the worlds of business, science, philanthropy, government, and non-governmental organizations, and sport, I might add, because of the sailors we have speaking today. This is going to be a great morning. I'm really looking forward to it. We've been planning this with a great committee from Volvo and Sail Newport and many other organizations for the past 6 months. So I really feel like this is my Christmas morning when I get to see all these presents unwrapped. In an academic environment where I am at home, a group of speakers this prominent would be given 3 days to communicate their ideas. But this is a race environment, and we have just 3 hours. So we will be going very quickly through our remarks. We have a schedule. I'm already 5 minutes behind, and that troubles me deeply, because it turns out that this room, this beautiful room, is so much in demand, we really do have to be out of here at 11:15. And so any time I spent dilly-dallying, that'll be time lost from question and answers. For members of the media, when we conclude at 11:15 promptly, we will walk out that door to a conference room where the remaining speakers will be available for interviews. Finally, to satisfy the legal requirements of the European Union, the United States of America, the state of Rhode Island, the exits are here and here. The toilets are downstairs. And please join me in turning off your cell phones so that we don't have annoying ringtones throughout the morning. Thanks very much. So to begin this great event, I would like to ask Henry Stenson, the Executive Vice President for Corporate Communication and Sustainability at the Volvo Group, to welcome us to this beautiful Volvo Pavilion. Mr. Stenson.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Volvo Pavilion. The ocean is something we all care about and something we all are depending on. The Volvo Group has a long history in talking about sustainability and environmental care. We added to our core values in 1972 environmental issues. And the founders of the company started talking about sustainability basically in 1927 because they thought that cars and trucks, as they were driven by people, it should be safe and have good quality. A good starting point, I think. For us, the Volvo Ocean Race gives us a good opportunity to get close to the issues, having the Volvo Ocean Race as we have. And being part of this, you also have to relate to and engage with different partners, because you can't do it all by yourself. You have to link up with others. So thank you so much, all of you, for participating here today. And a special thank you to the US State Department, to the Rhode Island Governor, to the Swedish Ministry of Environment, and specifically Sail Newport for being part of this, arranging this, and we all like to welcome you to the stopover in Newport for the Volvo Ocean Race. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stenson. Mr. Stenson, I did want to say as well that if you found it too inconvenient to move this beautiful pavilion, you could leave it here for a few more years. We're enjoying it very much. It's now my pleasure to introduce Björn Lyrvall, the ambassador of Sweden to the United States, who must be very proud of the strong Swedish presence he sees here in Newport. Ambassador Lyrvall.
Thank you very much. Thank you for those welcoming words. It's great to be here. It's a beautiful morning in Newport, and it's a wonderful location for this very important conversation. You live close to the sea here. Healthy oceans are really important. We share this situation as well in Sweden. It's one of the countries in Europe with the longest coastline, and the environmental status of the oceans are very, very important. Many of our areas, our coastal areas in our country, is also very heavily affected by pollution and by overfishing, by physical exploitation as well. So ocean policy, maritime policies are really a key priority for my government. And when this idea of this seminar came up, we were one of the initiators of it. We started this conversation in Alicante. It goes on here today, and we will be very pleased to continue when the race concludes in Gothenburg on the 26th of June. So this is an ongoing conversation, and we need to deal with this issue very seriously. Climate and environmental issues are really issues of mutual importance for Sweden and the United States. They have been highlighted in numerous high-level events over the past years. We had the president in Stockholm in September 13. We've had Secretary Kerry, former Secretary Clinton in Sweden discussing these issues over the past few years. And these are issues that continue to grow, of course, on our agenda. We are also very pleased with the committed work that the State Department has been doing in the US. We have done a number of seminars in our embassy in Washington, D.C. We're also very pleased with the Ocean Summit that Secretary Kerry convened last year. So, of course, now I'm particularly pleased to be here with Kathy Novelli, the Undersecretary from State Department. We're really pleased that she's here as well. I'd also like to thank, of course, the organizers here in Newport. Senator Whitehouse, thank you for your leadership on these issues. I know the governor is coming later on. There are a number of distinguished ambassadors and colleagues here as well. Later on this morning, we will hear from our particular Swedish ambassador on the oceans, Lisa Emilia Svensson as well. These are issues with no borders. Solutions will have to be achieved through common action and international cooperation among the different sectors of society. And this is what we are here to discuss today. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm honored and, of course, very pleased that we can be part of this big and important event. Thank you very much and have a good day.
And for a proper welcome to Newport and Rhode Island, it's now my pleasure to introduce Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, who has been sailing these waters for most of his life. Senator Whitehouse is a former U.S. attorney and Attorney General in Rhode Island, who was noted for prosecuting several very high-profile marine pollution cases. In the United States Senate, he is the founder of the Senate Ocean Caucus and has led the fight to establish a national endowment for the oceans. As a sailor and as a senator, he understands the complexity of ocean health issues and is in a position to do something about it. My friend, Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you, Dennis, and good morning and welcome. It is a great honor for me to be here with Assistant Secretary Novelli, with Ambassador Lyrvall and Ambassador Svensson, with our EPA Regional Administrator, Kurt Spalding, with Dean Corliss, the Dean of our wonderful Graduate School of Oceanography here in Rhode Island, and with Newport's terrific local representatives, Representative Carson and Representative Abney. One thing I think that we all share in this room is that we have the privilege of lives that link with the oceans. And a great many Americans either don't have that connection at all, or the connection is so rare that when they see the ocean, they don't really take any information away from it because they don't remember what it was before. They just see what they see with no point of reference. And so, for those of us who have the privilege of having an ongoing engagement with the oceans, with that privilege comes a responsibility, which is to bear witness to people who don't know what is going on out there. And from every corner of the oceans, alarms are ringing. You can go way up to the Arctic oceans, and you see the sea ice shelves that were a basic platform for the habitat and the ecosystem eroding and degrading. You can go down to the middle of the oceans, down to the tropic waters, and you can see the nurseries of life in the oceans, our coral reefs, bleaching and dying at alarming rates. You can go to the very top of the food chain and see the great apex whales, and when they wash ashore, as they sometimes do, they are so full of poison that if you drag them to the town dump, you'd be violating the hazardous waste disposal laws of the United States of America. We have turned these magnificent species into swimming toxic waste. And you can go from the top to the very bottom of the food chain where the humble, tiny pteropod is taking a real beating, particularly in the Pacific Northwest. Who cares about the humble pteropod? Well, mackerel do, herring do, salmon do, and those of us who depend on a vibrant ocean ecosystem do, because it is a foundation species in the ocean food chain. And you can go from near to far. Right here in Narragansett Bay, the temperature is up 3 to 4 degrees, mean winter water temperature, since Sandra started first doing her graduate work on the winter flounder in Narragansett Bay. In that time, the winter flounder in Narragansett Bay has gone from a major fishery to not a fishery at all. 1 generation. And far away, and to our point today, you can go to Midway Island, which is about as far away as you get. And if you walk around Midway Island, you will see it dotted with the corpses of juvenile albatross, which have been fed so much plastic unwittingly by their parents that they can no longer keep food in their stomachs, and they starve with bellies filled with bottle caps and plastic lighters. So thank you to the Volvo Ocean Race for helping all of us bear witness in this way. Thank you for each of you in the way that you do bear witness to what is going on out there, because we really need to pay attention to what the oceans are telling us. Thank you and have a wonderful morning. Welcome to Rhode Island.
And now to make that connection between marine debris and sailing, it's my great pleasure to introduce a great sailor himself and the CEO of the Volvo Ocean Race, Knut Frostad. Knut. Knut is previewing a great film.
Good morning to all of you. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to the Volvo Ocean Race. And I also like to introduce a good friend of mine, Charlie Enright, the skipper of Team of America. Morning, Charlie. And what we're going to do, we're going to present you a little fraction of what Charlie and his colleagues have experienced in the last 7 months. And then Charlie's going to tell us a bit of his personal experience of that. So please roll the film.
Look at all the shit in the water. Plastic, 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 plastic. Piece of wood, plastic, 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 plastic. It doesn't matter where you point it.
Well, as a sailor, I've always been aware of marine debris. Walking my dog on the foreshore at home, I'm always surprised how much there is. You couldn't possibly keep pace with it, trying to collect it.
The marine debris becomes blindingly obvious to you when you're near the areas of major population.
Wait, though.
I think the most surprising thing for me has been the amount of debris we've seen very, very far from land. You know, in the Southern Ocean, I mean, we're basically as far from man as you can be. And I remember at one point we were watching some seals, and then one of the girls who's up the rig is like, "Oh, look at that seal. Oh, it's a seal playing with a plastic bag." Definitely makes you realise the impact we're having.
One thing that sailing around the world does is it makes you realise just how small our planet is. If we can sail all the way across the widest ocean in 2 to 3 weeks in our small boats, that means the ocean isn't that big and we need to protect our seas.
The ocean is a big rubbish. There is too many.
How people in the world can't treat the ocean with more respect is just fully beyond me.
If we can just bring out the message how dirty the oceans are getting. It's not funny anymore.
Charlie, you live here in Newport. You have now been around the world because you started here, actually.
Yes, certainly.
What can you share? What's your experience?
Well, I guess I'm up here today. There we go, maybe. I'm up here today as the witness, the first-hand experience. And although that's a very powerful film, it's only the tip of the iceberg, really. I mean, that's only documented if the onboard reporter is there, ready to film in the middle of the day, not sleeping. That doesn't count what we see at night. That's just a small part of what we see, and what we see is a very small part of what's out there. As Knut said, you know, I'm Charlie Enright, skipper of Team Alphametica and a native Rhode Islander. Narragansett Bay is my barometer for ocean health, and you know, we're very fortunate that the waters we have are as pristine as they are. But people are the problem, and that's what you'll realize as you travel around the world. Where there are people, there is marine debris. You know, in the Southern Ocean, even though in that movie it said that there's, you know, there's some debris down there, it's certainly better than the Malacca Strait. The Malacca Strait is just, it's really disgusting and it's really unfortunate. There are parts of the strait that are very narrow and you feel like you could almost walk across it, you know, on the trash that's littered about. It even becomes a performance problem for us. The debris gets on our foils, we have to regularly back down, we have to put swimmers in the water to clear the foils off. We have endoscopes that allow us to look down below, underneath our boat, but at the times when we really need to use those for marine debris, the water's so murky we can't see anything anyway. It's unfortunate. And when the boat slows down in places like the Malacca Straits, the first thing that we think about is how we're going to get a swimmer in the water and how we're going to clear some of these problems. It really is a shame. But the good thing is, you know, we're moving in the direction of a solution. And I've been fortunate enough recently to become an 11th Hour Racing ambassador through the help of Wendy Schmidt and Rob McMillan. And we're very privileged to be able to do what we do, to sail around the world for a living. And I feel like it's our responsibility to bring awareness. Just like people are the problem, people need to be part of the solution. They certainly do. And, you know, I'm going to become a father here in just a couple months. And
And hopefully my son can grow up on Narragansett Bay and sail around the world in waters that are a little cleaner than the ones that I've seen lately. So that's the deal for sailing around the world, and I'm glad I can be an advocate and a witness to some of what you see here on the video and what I've seen all around the world.
Thank you. I'm going to share you very quickly, very shortly, some of my experiences in this race when it comes to this topic. And when Volvo asked me 7 years ago if I wanted to be the CEO of this race, and I have a long history in sailing in the ocean myself, I thought, what a fantastic opportunity to make some changes, because we work with all these governments. I mean, we work with 11 governments in this race, to state governments, local governments. We work with big corporations and companies. We work with shipping companies, and we have the media attention. It must be possible to do something. And I've had some frustration, and I'm going to share with you 4 lessons that I've taken with me to the future, and that we will take with us in the Volvo Ocean Race. And in 2008, Volvo sponsored United Nations Environmental Panel, and they host a conference every year called the Global Forum for Sport and Environment, and we had that forum in the start of the race in Alicante. And all the big sport events, the Olympic Games, the Soccer World Cup, NFL, NHL, NBA, all of them were there to tell each other how they work on sustainability, how they work to protect the environment, how they work with protecting the nature. And it was fascinating. It was my first time to a conference like that, and I was speaking and telling about the ocean. And I remember some very strange story. One big sport event, I won't say exactly who, had this program that in the stadium, they changed all the flags to green flags. And 2 things I took away. I said, one thing, we got to do better than hoisting green flags. That was the first thing. And the ocean is blue, by the way, or it's supposed to be blue, not green. The other thing I realized was that all these big sport events, it wasn't very difficult for them because they had to only focus on their arena. But what do you do if your arena is all the oceans in the world? What do you do if your arena is the whole planet and not just a football stadium? Because it is a lot easier. So, who owns the ocean? This is my first big lesson trying to make some change. On this map, everything that is blue is owned and controlled by nobody. It's so-called international waters. The white pieces are territorial waters, some of them disputed, but the blue things are international waters, means it's owned and controlled by nobody. That means nobody cares, normally. This is the biggest fundamental issue. So one thing, the first lesson I had with my team, and this has been facing me every time we go to every country, is to ask someone to clean up their backyard is not that difficult. Some places it's a bit, but the ocean is really not someone's backyard. And that is a fundamental issue we need to realize when we're going to work with the ocean. It's a hell of a lot easier to impose no plastic drinking bottles in the race village in Newport than it is to change the whole ocean out there, because that's where the problem is. So that's the first lesson. Then in 2008, I met 3 wonderful people, 3 surfers who were extremely tired of getting out of the waves with plastic in their hair and plastic in their faces. And these guys also happened to be artists, and they proposed this fantastic program to me, and we took them with us around the world, and in every single stopover, we created a program called Keep the Ocean Clean. The program was to have beach cleans pick up plastic in the local beaches in every country we went, clean that plastic, and together with the children in the school classes, create art and exhibit that art for the public and the media. It was a great program. It was a really interesting program. Some of the art became actually museum pieces and are exhibited today in the Museum of Art in Valencia and some in Germany. This is a huge tuna fish made of flip-flops from the beach in Cape Town. The most amazing these things guys did one day was they made a huge fish out of plastic bottles, invited the media, and they carried the fish out in the ocean and threw it out. Because that's what you normally do when a big animal lands on your beach, and that's where it came from. However, when we got to China, something changed and something happened. So I met with the government and I said, we have this program. You want to show that we can clean the beaches and make it clean. I said, no, we do not have plastic on our beaches. And I said, no, please, we do have, here's some pictures. It's quite terrible. No, we don't have, so we don't want this program. And in the end, after one day of negotiations, they accepted that we could have a beach clean. However, before we had woken up that morning, the military had cleaned every beach on Hainan Island. Because they don't want to know about it. And this is not a Chinese problem, trust me. We work today with 11 countries, and I would say 50% of those countries have this problem. Ignorance, huge challenge. No one really cares about it. People care about things that are very close to them. The ocean is comfortably far enough away to not care about it. The third thing, a lot of people ask me and Charlie, what are the difference between being on land and being at sea? And one thing that I like to say is that, you know, on land today, we have absolutely everything we need in our lives, and more of that. The only thing we don't have is time. When Charlie is out in the water, on those boats, they have nothing. Have a look inside them. There's nothing there, nothing. And the only thing they have is time. And sailing is a beautiful way to learn that the price of sometimes saving the environment is time. If you let Mother Nature rule to decide when you arrive, it will sometimes take longer. And when I pick up plastic bottles on the beaches, I quite often think to myself, who threw it? Who threw that bottle? Why did he throw that bottle? And I only found two answers to that. One is, he thinks the ocean is a rubbish bin. Then we have a communication challenge. And the other is, it took less time than walking to the bin. And I've seen that, for example, in Asia, where we work a lot. In some of the places, it's really complicated for people to get to the bins. It's a lot shorter when you live on islands in Indonesia to throw it out of the window. So time is the third thing. We need to realize that there's a price for the pollution, that is time. And finally, Charlie mentioned all the challenge they have in the race today with getting debris off their dagger boards and keels. This is a picture we didn't take in the 1980s and the 1990s. This is a picture we have almost every day, many times a day on all the boats. And this is actually on Charlie's boat, one of your crew members hanging over the side, trying to see the plastic on the keels and the rudders. And we can tell that story. And no one can tell that story better than us. And you spoke about your endoscope. Here's the endoscope. Constantly, they have someone inside the boat, looking under the boat to see the plastic, because it slows them down all the time. This time, we partnered with NOAA, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration in the United States. And we deployed research buoys in the Southern Ocean to measure climate change. Something only we can do, because we are the only one who go to the Southern Ocean. And the sailors love to do that, and they actually love to talk about it. But I think we need to talk about it with some credibility. So that leads me to the final thing that I think we can do in the Volvo Ocean Race in the future, and that is to tell a story. Much more than we're doing today. We can tell a story because the ocean is our backyard. We can tell a story because we can't ignore it. We can tell a story because we have the time, and we can take the time to do the right things. And I think we can tell a good story, and I think you can do that too. Thank you very much for listening.
Knut, stay. Knut. I've cleverly gotten this 2 minutes ahead of schedule. So we can take a couple of questions right now before we get to the general questions later, if anybody has any questions for the sailors here right now.
I like it that you call me a sailor still. That's 30 years ago, but it's good to know.
Yes, sir. Can we have a mic? Well, I've got a mic. Is this one on? Yes, sir. Yes, you're on.
Oh, yes, sorry about that. Still asleep. Yeah, I'm happy to be here, and more so because I'm seeing a very good combination of athletes, sportsmen, and I'm sure women as well, coming together to deal with issues of environmental sustainability. As we are from the United Nations, and we represent our countries. And every year there is an omnibus resolution on oceans and the law of the sea. And we have begun to put language in that resolution as the one adopted in December of last year. My question to you is that would you be prepared to accept an invitation to host a side event, resources permitting, at the United Nations to give this type of visibility to something that we have put in writing, but we do not always benefit from seeing what actually is happening in our areas beyond national jurisdiction, the oceans. Thank you.
I think absolutely. I don't have to think twice about that. No, if we can do more to showcase what's going on, that's what we want to do, and I think that's what we can. The witnessing and documenting and transmitting those pictures and those video clips. The video we just saw, we're working on a longer version of that we're going to publish and try to distribute as much as possible online, and all of you will get your copy to help sharing in that, because I think we can share it with an audience, a wider audience as well than who normally actually sees that.
I know I'm personally very willing to go be a witness and an advocate, that's for sure. And if Knut gives us the time and grants us permission, we'll be there.
Great. One more question? Anyone? Yes, sir, in back. Let's get the mic to you. Just hang on one sec.
This is for Charlie Enright. Charlie, you mentioned the Malacca Strait being a particularly filthy place. I'm wondering if you could take us briefly through the course and mention some of the debris, what you saw, where you saw it, and what was perhaps the most surprising thing you saw along the way?
That's a good question. You know, it's not just the Malacca Strait, but it's one of the areas that's most densely filled with marine debris, so it's the one that kind of pops to mind immediately. You know, it really does come down to the people and the population centers. You know, where there are people, there is marine debris. It is kind of that simple. You know, the Southern Ocean is a little bit cleaner than the Malacca Strait. You know, things that we see there include, you know, pallets from cargo ships, big lines for tying things down, fishing nets, plastic, coolers, tires. I mean, it's really quite unbelievable. You know, the route of this race has changed a tremendous amount for socioeconomic reasons, for a lot of different reasons. And it brings us more to these population centers, and that really gives us an opportunity to see some of this marine debris and help implement change.
Right. Thanks very much. Thanks to Charlie and to Knut.
Thank you.
We will have a chance to talk further with them at the general Q&A when we break after our next two speakers. It's now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Sandra Whitehouse, who earned her PhD from the Graduate School of Oceanography at the University of Rhode Island, I'm happy to say. In her role as a senior policy advisor to the Ocean Conservancy, she's now going to report on the latest research on marine debris, as well as the potential for global solutions to the problem. She is also one of the reasons that Senator Whitehouse is so well prepared on ocean issues. Dr. Whitehouse.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for Volvo for hosting this event and for inviting me here this morning to talk about ocean plastic and to also focus on some of the science and propose some of the new solutions that we're finding. Before I begin, though, I would like to just share with you that I grew up sailing here in Newport, right out of the Ida Lewis Yacht Club over there, with my sisters on board my Aunt Rose's aptly named schooner, the Defiance. This picture was taken in 1969, and in those days, there really wasn't much plastic in the oceans. However, we see a very different scenario today. There's actually been an exponential increase worldwide in plastic production, certainly since the 60s when plastic was relatively new to us. Part of the reason for that is actually plastic has a great deal of utility. It can be used as agricultural film mulch, which greatly increases crop yield and decreases the amount of water that you need to use. It can be used as a vehicle to provide clean drinking water to parts of the population that actually didn't have access to that before. And I'm going to take my earring off. Sorry about that. And obviously, that's good for for health benefits for those people who are now getting clean drinking water. The problem, of course, is when plastic gets into our oceans. And part of the reason for that is that plastic persists. We know that it stays in our oceans from decades to centuries and just fragments into smaller and smaller pieces. What we've learned is that the origins of plastic in our oceans, only 20% of it is from activities at sea. A full 80% is from activities at land. At sea, plastic's getting into the oceans, either direct dumping into our waterways, fishing gear that is lost or in some cases irresponsibly disposed of, or container spills, as we heard earlier from Charlie. The biggest problem, though, is coming from land, and we refer to this as leakage of plastic into our oceans. Sounds bad, leakage. Some of it's direct litter into waterways, some of it's illegal dumping, sometimes directly on a beach or on a riverside. It's when we have uncovered landfills where it's being washed or blown into our waterways, and in some cases, unavoidably, it's from natural disasters such as the Japanese tsunami. We now, just this year, with the paper published by Dr. Jambeck in Science, have actually, for the first time, an estimate of how much plastic is going into our oceans on an annual basis. And we can make this sort of calculation based on the size of the coastal buffer, how many people are living there. As Charlie said, it's the people that are causing the problem. As people become more and more affluent, especially in rapidly developing countries, they're buying more goods and services. Some of those are ending up as waste. Some of that percentage of that is plastic. Some of it's not managed or littered and then is getting into the ocean. So the important number to focus on here, this is just the sort of step downs from plastic being produced to how much is in the coastal areas. The important number is 8. 8 million metric tons of plastic are getting into the oceans on an annual basis. So we can also look at this, break this down in terms of individuals in different countries. Here in the US, we produce pretty much waste, not in this forum, which has actually been a very sustainably run event. Thank you to everyone who helped with that. About 13% of our waste is plastic. The good news, though, as represented by the trash bin, is that 99 to 100% of our waste is properly managed and actually gets ultimately into a landfill. In Sweden, where there are more model citizens, some of whom are here today, they are producing a lot less waste. Even a smaller fraction of that is plastic. Again, it's almost completely properly managed. It's a very different picture when you go to a country like Indonesia. They're producing a lot less waste. The percentage of plastic is comparable to ours. The problem, however, is that less than 20% of it is being properly managed. The rest of it is available to leak into the ocean through these different pathways. So what we've learned, and again this is from the Jambeck paper, is that plastic leakage really is geographically concentrated. And our data completely confirms what Charlie and Knut have described, because in fact the Mallorca Passage, or Straits, is right where all of this leakage is geographically concentrated. So it's no surprise that that's where you ran into the worst plastic in the oceans. If we take these kinds of calculations and move out into the future, it's really kind of scary. By 2025, we could actually see a doubling of plastics in our oceans. That means that in 10 years, there could be 1 ton of plastic for every 3 pounds of finfish in the ocean, or tons. That's a pretty frightening thought. So where's this plastic going? We've already heard that some of it's going onto our beaches, getting washed up. We've all seen that. As an aside, but an important one, the Ocean Conservancy has actually been running beach cleanups called the International Coastal Cleanup worldwide for over 30 years, where we do one cleanup around the world in one day in September. We've collected a lot of information. We've gotten millions of people involved. It's been a very important advocacy tool and education. It's also a very romantic way to spend a Saturday morning with your loved one, just as a pitch to this coming up one. And very importantly, we have collected information on every item that's been picked up from those beaches in the last 30 years. And this data is actually going to be released next week from our last cleanup. And what we see is that a lot of these items are plastic. Another place where we know there's a lot of plastic is floating in the oceans, as we've already seen. And we've heard about these garbage patches, these gyres, especially in the Pacific. And there is a lot of plastic. There's a lot of plastic out there floating in the oceans. It is not, however, one giant island of plastic trash. This picture was actually taken by Nick Mallos, one of Ocean Conservancy Science, in the middle of the Pacific Gyre. And you know, if it was one big floating island of trash, we could probably haul it back to land and get rid of it. But it's even worse. It's dispersed everywhere. We see it, as Sheldon mentioned, in Arctic sea ice, where when the water freezes, whatever plastic's in it gets into the sea ice. And of course, since we're seeing more and more melting, more of those plastic pieces are getting released back into the ocean. We also see it on the seafloor from shallow areas to the deepest parts of our ocean. And of course, very frighteningly, we see it in the bellies of many species of ocean wildlife. And that's where we're starting to see, and as Sheldon also mentioned, that was my talking point, Sheldon. We see a lot of ecological impacts. You know, when a stomach is filled with plastic pieces, it's not digestible. There's also some contaminants associated with that plastic that can get into the tissue. Even the tiniest organisms in the ocean, these are barely visible to the naked eye zooplankton, are eating these smallest fragments of plastic. And of course, we've all seen these tragic pictures of entanglement of ocean wildlife with plastic and the negative consequences. In fact, if we look at all the major taxa of larger wildlife, more than 60% are getting impacted. In fact, for sea turtles, virtually 100% of them are being impacted by ocean plastic. And of course, we can't forget the fact that there's a lot of economic impacts. Derelict fishing gear out there is still catching lobster and crabs, but they're not getting to market. Beaches with plastic are going to lose tourism dollars. Damage to vessels, you all have seen that directly. And of course, there's going to be human health impacts. While we haven't really quantified these, clearly this is not a sanitary situation. And finally, we know that there's human safety impacts. When a waterway is clogged with plastic and if there's a heavy rain, the flooding is going to be made even worse. So what are the solutions? Well, we've been doing a lot of work to try to figure this out. A tiny part of the solution, and in the long term, can be redesign. We need to get little tiny microbeads out of our facial scrub that are made of plastic. We just don't need that. We can take bottles and redesign them so that the cap is connected and actually gets into the recycling stream as opposed to being separately disposed of. Maybe more people will smoke e-cigarettes as opposed to having cigarette butts all over our beaches. But again, this is just a tiny portion of the solution. We can certainly make a little bit of headway by reducing our excess packaging. There's no reason for apples to be wrapped in plastic on top of a styrofoam bin. We can all get a canvas bag from Ocean Conservancy for our grocery shopping, or a reusable water bottle. And of course, we can do recycling. And in fact, many countries are recycling and have good recycling programs. One of the things we've learned recently in our research is that recycling really works for high-value plastic, like water bottles, because people can collect enough of these, and there's enough of a market for them to make a day's wage. For these low-value plastics, like plastic bags and agricultural film, they really don't there's not enough incentive economically for people to recycle this. We can do a tiny bit of upcycling, making beach bags or beanbag chairs, or as you said, art projects. I think these are really more education and advocacy tools than actually a realistic solution to solving our plastic waste. So what we really need to do is get back to looking at where the plastic's geographically concentrated. What we've learned is that 57% of the plastic is coming from these 5 top countries. This is because these countries are rapidly developing. There's huge increases in population. They're becoming much more affluent, and there's more plastic getting into the waste stream than the management system has been able to cope with at this point. And what we've done is some recent research where we've looked for each country at each of these countries at all of the different places where there can be leakage into the oceans. And now what we've been able to do is pinpoint where the problems are in some of these areas. So in China, for example, we know it's got a huge rural population. The problem is at the collection point. It's not getting collected. It's either getting directly put into the waterways as litter, it's going to a community dump, which is usually just a pile of trash on the side of the river or on a beach. So the first step that we need to focus on in China is just getting it collected so it can get to the dump truck, so it can get to a proper landfill. In other countries like the Philippines, the waste has actually been being collected pretty well. The problem there is it's not getting from the dump truck to a proper landfill. It's either being illegally dumped or it's being put into open dumps. So in the Philippines, this is where we know we need to focus our energy. So really what we've learned is that there is no single solution. We're going to have to tailor solutions for individual countries at individual key points in the waste management cycle. But just knowing that has moved the ball forward quite a bit in terms of helping us get to our final solution. So really what we need to do, if we're going to avoid this doubling of plastic in the next 10 years, we need to be driving down this curve. And the focus is on reducing leakage. We can do a little bit with recycling. And in the future, as we continue to try to push down this curve and not have less plastic in the ocean as opposed to more, we need to take a sort of all of the above approach. So really, everyone who's here today has some responsibility and role in helping with this. At Ocean Conservancy, 5 years ago, we created the Trash-Free Seas Alliance, where we brought together corporate partners, academic partners, funders, and just to really sort of try to solve this problem. An outgrowth of this has been a global collective effort. It's really a signature part of the Trash-Free Seas Alliance. And we launched this about a year ago to both collect the science and do the research to start laying out these solution sets. Because I think the important problem can be solved. You know, this is not like carbon. We can solve this problem. And as Charlie said, you know, we really need to stop using our oceans as our rubbish bin. And at Ocean Conservancy, we're going to continue to work to advance the solutions because really we all want a healthy ocean. Thank you.
Thank you. Great job. Thank you so much.
Thanks. No questions.
We will have time for questions in about half an hour. Thank you so much, Sandra. That was a great, thorough approach, exactly the kind of scientific approach we were looking for to ground what the sailors are seeing with the facts from the world of science. I'm now pleased to introduce Catherine Novelli, Undersecretary for Economic Growth, Energy, and the Environment from the United States Department of State. In that role, she leads the State Department's efforts to develop and implement economic growth, energy, ocean, and environmental policies to promote economic prosperity. Undersecretary Novelli.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Dennis. I am absolutely thrilled to be here on Narragansett Bay at the Volvo Ocean Pavilion. And I want to thank the Volvo Ocean Race and Sail Newport for hosting this summit. I'd like to welcome in particular my colleagues from the diplomatic community, especially Ambassador Lyrvall and Ambassador Svensson, and to thank them for joining us in this important endeavor and for their support. And I'd also like to thank Senator Whitehouse and Dr. Sandra Whitehouse, who, as you can see, is an amazing conservationist and scientist, and Senator Whitehouse, who's been an outspoken leader in the Senate on ocean conservation and addressing climate change. The citizens of Rhode Island are very, very lucky to have him as their senator. I also want to thank Knut Frostad and the sailors. And just to say a special thanks to Charlie Enright and Mark Towell, who gave me a tour of the Alva Medica boat today, which was a total thrill, because as chance happened, when I was traveling for other reasons in South Africa, I looked out my window of my hotel in Cape Town, and there were all the boats from the race who happened to be there at the same time I was there. I'm sure it was planned. And so just being able to actually get on one of those boats, because I've been following the race ever since, and so it was just thank you so much for that thrill. I also want to thank them for the video that they're making and for the witness that they're bearing, because I think, as you can see from all the pictures that Sandra had, the pictures that the Avamedica team has, it's really important that we show the pictures. And as Knut said, I think people feel moved when they see those pictures, and they really understand what does it mean that there is a problem that we have in the ocean. We don't need to have this be a tragedy of the commons, as they say in our economic course, about the parts of the ocean that are not owned by anybody. So it's very important, that bearing witness, and I want to thank them for that. And really our hope is that as the Volvo Cup race goes from port to port, the level of public enthusiasm and engagement that's generated by the race itself can be turned into change and can be turned into action for actually trying to solve some of these problems, and so that we can move forward. I am a passionate advocate for the ocean, and it's not an exaggeration to say that we depend on the ocean for our very existence. And you all know that better than most people do, that the ocean isn't just a highway to race across. It regulates our climate and our weather. It generates half of the oxygen we breathe and absorbs a lot of the excess carbon we produce. It provides food and income for billions of people, and it's a source of inspiration, beauty, and recreation. Humanity is connected to the ocean. The human body itself is well over half water, and our fate is inextricably tied to the ocean's fate. And I know that you all know that, but I think we have to keep saying those things. And we can see from what we've seen already that the ocean's in trouble. We have depleted fishing stocks, and fish are continuing to be overfished. There's runoff and plastic debris that are choking our waters. And the chemistry of the ocean itself is changing and becoming more acidic because of the carbon that we're putting into the air. And, you know, that is enough to just make you really be moved to tears, if you think about it. But what I really want to leave everybody here with today is that there is hope. This is not a hopeless situation. These are things that we can solve, we can all solve. And fixing them is going to require us to work together. It's going to require concerted and sustained action that we all have to take, but they absolutely can be fixed. And we need to fix them. And you all need to fix them. It isn't just a matter of governments or sailors or a few individuals or scientists or NGOs. It's every single person's responsibility to take action. And a year ago, Secretary Kerry hosted the Our Ocean Summit to bring attention to and find solutions for some of these problems that have been outlined. And he said, no matter where you live, you can help in some way. And so this problem of plastic waste in the ocean is a perfect example of what we can all do, because we know that plastic is useful, as Sandra pointed out. It helps healthcare, food preservation, it can reduce energy use as lightweight packaging, but plastic is the ultimate irony, because many of these products are created for a single short-term use, and then they live on for centuries as trash. So somebody might properly discard a water bottle, a bag from the grocery store, or some packaging that came with a new cell phone, and they can put it in the trash or in recycling, but that plastic waste could stay with us for a really long time. And when it's not properly managed, as you've seen, it finds its way into our waterways and ultimately the ocean. And we've heard the statistics about the 3 tons of fish and 1 ton of plastic that we're heading towards. I'll give you another visual thought about what that means. The 8 million metric tons that Sandra talked about that ended up in the ocean in 2010 is enough to line up 5 grocery bags of trash on every foot of the coastline in the world. And 80% of that originates on land. So we really have to tackle this. So what do we do about it? And this is where we all have a role to play. Governments, businesses, scientists, engineers, funders, advocates, sailors, and just individual citizens. And I'd just like to echo some of the things that Sandra talked about, and to say that folks are doing these things now. So in terms of the 3 R's, which are reduce, reuse, and recycle. So for reducing the amount of plastic waste we produce and use, we have great management of waste collection here in the US, but we still need to do better ourselves. As individuals, we can reduce the amount of plastic we use and the plastic waste we generate. I was so excited to see the boxed water, which I had never seen before, but that is a really innovative way to think about what can be done. There are some really neat things that are going on in this area. A company called NewGen Surgical is making single-use medical devices and surgical products using non-plastic materials that feel like plastic. Mango Materials is a firm in San Francisco Bay that already holds a patent to produce a kind of bioplastic that is biodegradable. And I'm going to be meeting next week with a company who is making plastic-like material that, when it hits the water, turns into water. So, so there are things that are being developed here, and we need to do more. The second thing, the reuse. We need to improve national systems for waste management so we can better reuse plastic. And as has already been pointed out, we have a real issue here because economies and middle classes are growing in other parts of the world, but their waste collection is way down here. So this triangle is just getting bigger and bigger. And so we are going to be working through diplomacy, through partnerships, and to really expand the waste collection infrastructure, especially in Asia. And what's great is that plastic debris actually has value. So with the right incentives and infrastructure, it can be recaptured, reused, and transforms into new materials, including energy. And that brings us to the 3rd R, which is recycle. We need to recycle plastics whenever we can. We need to demand innovations through the power of the marketplace. Waste-to-energy projects and recycling innovations actually hold great promise, and here's some examples for you. We're working with a company in the Philippines that is collecting trash and turning it into diesel fuel for their local fishing fleet today already. These are not things in the future. A young group of entrepreneurs from the United States has started a company called Burio that takes discarded fishing nets and recycles them into skateboards, which are sold through Patagonia stores and at surf shops. There is also a company called Bionic Yarn that is taking ocean plastic and turning it into thread for things like designer jeans by Pharrell Williams and products by H&M and Adidas. So there is already work underway, and we just need to actually make this engage exponentially so that we can really start absorbing some of this. We are hearing from all of you about the need to have this as a priority. Secretary Kerry has made it clear it's a priority for him. It's also a priority for me. And we actually, just the other day, Secretary Kerry received a letter signed by 23,000 members of the Ocean Conservancy asking the Secretary to continue working to bring the global attention to these issues. And we are going to continue to do just that, and we're going to do our part. And our part is we are raising this issue in all of our meetings with foreign ministers, foreign leaders. Sandra talked about China. We've actually put a huge agenda item on our upcoming ministerial meeting with China that goes over our entire relationship from security to economics, and there's a big block reserved to talk about oceans and to talk about these problems of plastic. So we're hoping they don't tell us there is no problem and that we can work together. We're also working with the diplomatic community around the world to put it on the international agenda more broadly so that we can take action. And we expect a big announcement to come out of the G7 in June about working on marine debris. We're working in the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum so that we can engage all those countries in Asia where you saw on the map that there's a serious problem. And we're seeking out partners to support projects. So we don't want to just talk about things, we want to do things. And so what we're looking at is making major amounts of resources available through entities like the USAID, the World Bank, the Global Environmental Facility, and several other multinational development banks, because this isn't a million-dollar problem, it's a major billions of dollars of problems, and we have to mobilize that kind of capital. So just in closing, what I'd like to say is this Ocean Summit, the overall Volvo Ocean Race, it can have a tremendous impact in getting this word out about what needs to be done. And the activities that surround it are fantastic. So the Clean Ocean Access team here did a great job of picking up plastic at Fort Adams right here. And I understand they picked up almost 8,000 items. Which is more than 1,500 pounds. It's an amazing effort. So kudos to you all. I know that this can seem daunting and overwhelming, and even just sitting here myself and watching that video and listening to the statistics and seeing the photos, you almost feel like, what can I do? This is just so huge, and you feel very depressed. But I want to leave you with this thought that this is all about the ocean, and the ocean is made up of billions and billions of individual drops of water. And when you put those small drops of water together, they may seem like not very much, one little drop, but they actually cover almost 3/4 of the surface of the earth. So my call to action to you is, let's create an ocean of people. Let's spur a tidal wave of action, because together we can save the ocean and save the world. So thank you very much, and I look forward to acting with you.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, please remain on stage. Catherine, please remain on stage. And could I have our other speakers up from the morning session? We've got some Q&A time right now. So Knut, Charlie, Senator Whitehouse, and we'll get those high tops here and another microphone. So we have about 15 minutes for Q&A generally with all the morning speakers. And I'd like to look for that first question. Yes, in back. And we have microphone runners. Right here in front row then. And please announce who you'd like to address your question to. Well, they're going to get it on for you in just a moment. Just keep talking and see. Test. Gil, we've got a dead mic there. Gil, there we go. 1, 2, 2. Okay, now we've got a mic. Great.
Good morning. My question is really for anyone who can answer it. I think perhaps Dr. Whitehouse. When we see the amount of waste that's in the southern Asian area, what types of waste is it there? Is it, and what are they throwing away? Is it bottles from soda? Is it stuff that we're selling to them? Where are the products coming from, is the second part of my question, that is causing this waste in those areas, so that we can try to figure out how to get into the marketplace to change their purchasing habits?
Well, first of all, I just want to emphasize that this is really an unintended consequence of rapid development. You know, and we should be encouraging these countries to develop rapidly. In the future, as other countries like in Western Africa start more on that development curve, we're going to see problems there. So the problem is currently in Southeast Asia, but that's just for now. And again, you know, one of the major areas of plastic that are a problem are these low-value plastics. It's the plastic bags, it's the agricultural film. It's sort of what I think of in layman's terms as kind of thin plastic. It's very hard to collect. It doesn't have a market. We already know that in a lot of countries, the plastic bottles and those high-value plastics are getting collected and recycled. So I think what we've learned with our recent research is that we really need to create a market or a way for dealing with these low-value plastics. Some of that in some countries where there's very high energy costs, like the Philippines, might be, as Kathy referred to, the waste to energy, you know, that as a potential solution. But it's not going to be, that's not going to be a viable option in every country. But again, the most important thing right now is to stop the leakage from those 5 major countries.
Great, thank you. From this side of the room, yes, madam.
Hello, my name is Lois Partially, and I'm here with Popular Science magazine. This question is both for Mrs. Whitehouse and Mrs. Novelli. You mentioned that there are educational tools like building baskets out of this low-value plastic, and Ms. Novelli, you mentioned mango and new materials that might take the place of that. This is not to denigrate those educational tools, but is there another way that we could be using those low-value plastics or creating new materials to help solve the problem?
Do you want to take it?
Well, in terms of the new materials, the Trash-Free Seas Alliance has actually got, you saw the companies that are there that are dedicated to looking at this, and I think this is really something that we have to catalyze the private sector to do more, and we are trying to do that as part of the government through USAID, through Science Foundation, through other kinds of grants. There are a number of companies who are also, because it's important for them to be conservation minded, who are taking these actions. And I think the other really important thing is that consumers need to demand that these actions be taken. We're a market-driven economy, and so companies are going to respond to the market, and the great thing is that we're one of the most innovative countries in the world, and so we can innovate solutions to the problems and finding alternatives to these kind of packaging.
And I might just add to that, I completely agree with Kathy, and certainly developing new products and innovative new types of plastic is an important part, especially of the long-term solution. But for the short term, we need to focus on these key points of leakage in these key countries, because it's happening so fast. Certainly, as I said, we need all of the above, and developing new materials is part of that. But right now, we need to focus our resources probably on a different part of the problem.
Great, thank you. And on this side of the room, yes, ma'am.
Hi, thank you so much. My name is Martha McConnell. I'm here with the U.S. Coast Guard Academy and also Polar Advisor to IUCN. And I want to thank all the ocean champions in the room. The legislation federally and internationally is still very much in its infancy, less than a decade old. And so while we have a long way to go, we've come quite far so far just in the last 10 years. And I have a question about the international agenda. I think a lot about the processes at the International Maritime Organization. They're convening now to hopefully pass the first ever polar shipping code in the next couple days. And banning of waste and garbage is part of the polar shipping code and part of the MARPOL convention. But one of the biggest roadblocks from both developing and non-developing countries is the adequate or lack of adequate port reception facilities for the waste. And we know in Southeast Asia, we may not have a lot of those reception facilities for the different wastes. And And so on this international agenda, how much is the US and other more developed nations and the Swedish delegation as well involved in helping either with resources or knowledge sharing on where we can place those facilities to be able to implement that international legislation? Thank you.
Great question.
Well, we are actually working on this now, and one of the international things that we're working on is what's called the post-2015 agenda of the United Nations, which may sound kind of like a murky thing. But what's great about that is that the agenda, the development agenda that happened pre-2015 actually got implemented globally. It got a ton of attention, not so much in the US, but everywhere where it really needed to get the attention, and things happened. And there is going to be a whole section of that on oceans and what needs to be done, including in this area. So it's really going to, I think, be a way to bring a lot of these pieces together. But as the United States, we are doing knowledge sharing. We are doing all kinds of things to work with ports and make them more efficient. That is an across-the-board project that we're engaged in the developing world.
Comments, Sandra, the Senator?
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Bell.
Victor Bell from Environmental Packaging International. And presently, we have a sort of minor crisis going on with recycling, specifically in the United States and the rest of the world, because of some major factors happening. The lower price of oil has really made a lot of the value of new plastics, virgin plastics, have boomed, has gone down, and the price to recycle old plastics has really raised, and also the economics of bio-based material. What are we doing to expand those areas in the United States? And also, when we look at extended producer responsibility in China, Philippines, we know that they're looking at it, but we know the Europeans are pushing them, but not the U.S. State Department.
Victor, to whom is the question directed?
Well, I would think it's the White House and
Senator Whitehouse, we'll let you...
Yeah, I know who it's not directed
to. We don't have anything moving in that direction now. There are a lot of initiatives at the state level. I know that there's been work done here in Rhode Island on that. I will say one thing, though, and that is everybody thinks of the partisan divide in Washington, and everybody recognizes that the partisan divide is probably most acute over environmental issues. Notwithstanding that, there is a bipartisan Senate Oceans Caucus. There are a lot of issues we can't address because some of our colleagues can't talk about them. But one of the ones that we have agreed to address on a bipartisan basis, Senator Murkowski and I are the two leads there, is marine debris. And we are now framing what that agenda is going to be. Our first was IUU pirate fishing, and we got 4 treaties confirmed last year on one day. It had taken 9 years to get the previous 4 treaties confirmed, so we actually have a little bit of a record. So while we don't have an answer yet, we do have a live process towards an answer in the Senate that is bipartisan, and I encourage you and everyone else to work with us to put teeth into that and make it work.
Thank you, Senator, and I guarantee we can get you good panels of testimony when that bill does come before the U.S. Senate. Another question on this side of the room, where the mic is. Yes?
Hi, my name's Barbara Van Buren. I'm from the Van Buren Charitable Foundation. And recently, having been diving in Indonesia, I completely understand what some of these trash issues are. But I'd like to come back to what's more local here in Rhode Island. You know, the reduce, recycle is something that many of us feel it's hard to impact when you're here and all that's happening over there. So what are we doing here in Rhode Island, and maybe this is for other people as well, this question, to address these global issues at our more local, sometimes solutions come out of the grassroots and the ground. What are we doing here in Rhode Island that we can support locally?
That in our second morning session, Governor Raimondo will be here to address exactly those issues. But I would like any member of the panel, if you'd like to make any comments, I would suggest that we, if you wouldn't mind, if we leave that answering that question to the governor, whose agenda is to address precisely that question.
And Barbara, you're sitting 3 down from our DEM director, Shave the Bay director, and you're in a good spot there.
Here? We need Mike. We need a mic up front. Yes, sorry.
Hi, my name is Ronald Hanley. I run a large investment firm. And a famous business person once said, when asked why you rob banks, because that's where the money is, what are you doing to engage the investment community? I just coincidentally got back from 3 weeks on the road talking to a lot of sovereign wealth investors who have big sustainability agendas. This is not on it. There's a lot of other issues on it, but this one's not on it.
Well, almost just exactly like the previous question, we have a speaker who will be addressing the issue of sustainable investing. That's the Robico-san presentation coming up in about 45 minutes. So that precise question of trying to basically put sustainability, marine debris reduction on the agenda of the world's major corporations. So when Harvard decides they only want to invest in something totally green, they can get advice to invest that way. So yes, investors can make a major choice, and this is clearly one part of the solution. But I'd say stand by for Mr. Wild's presentation and ask him that question when he concludes his presentation.
Can I just add one thing,
Absolutely,
though? In terms of engaging the investors to put money and invest themselves into this, that's one of the reasons why we had the Our Ocean Summit and designed it the way we did, is because we recognized that this isn't just an issue where we bring together governments or NGOs, or that we need everybody, including the investment community. And we may not have reached out to the folks that you talked to, but we are reaching out. I just got back from Silicon Valley, meeting with VCs there. And so we are reaching out to try to catalyze the VC and investment community into putting money into looking at the solutions to this problem. So we actually are working on it, but we appreciate any help you want to give to that end.
And I might just add that part of the Trash-Free Seas Alliance that Ocean Conservancy has put together is to get those investors involved and to try to determine in a very scientific way how we use the market to raise the capital and governments to be able to invest in the waste management infrastructure.
There's a question right here. Yes, ma'am. And
Ocean. We've been working on marine debris in New England and beyond for 5 years now. And our experience is that, except for this room where we have a lot of people voluntarily and enthusiastically talking about trash for 3 hours, in general, people don't want to talk about trash. And I'm curious what, as you have been speaking with people at high level in government and corporate worlds, what's been resonating as you've been getting them to talk about trash and then even better take action for it?
I think I'm going to give that one to Knut, because here you're bringing this really to the world's attention.
Well, with my humble approach to that, because obviously I don't have the same network in government as some of the other speakers, but I'd like to tell you one encouraging story. So when we went around the world with our Keep the Ocean Clean art program, the one country where it worked the best was the one we didn't expect. And it was the second worst country on plastic litter after China, which was Brazil. And if you have ever walked along some beaches in Brazil outside the populated areas, because the populated areas get cleaned, it's terrible. The beaches are terrible. Google it on internet, beaches in Brazil, plastic. You will get shocked. And we had this little city in Santa Catarina, south state of Brazil, where we have the stopover. And they have a river going through the city. And the river looked like sewage when we first got there. And we said, you have to do something if we're going to keep the race here. We brought this program. And I would say a big part of the population in that state are quite poor people. The kids do not have iPhone 6s. You know, and they have a program running today, which is the most impressive I've seen ever. That started with this
Keep the Ocean Keep the Ocean Clean program. They are recycling everything in the race village, on site, displaying it, showing it to all the 350,000 people we had through the village, cleaning every single piece of plastic. And the kids have a young ambassador program for 12 to 18-year-olds. They have started themselves. They run 80 hours, and it does work in some places. It's just that they don't have the facilities. They didn't even have places to throw it. So my experience is that it is hope, and sometimes we think that the less developed countries just can't do it and they don't care, but they do care.
Mm-hmm.
They don't just really have the means to do it.
Thank you, Knut. That's a great story. You have the microphone. Go ahead, sir.
Yes. Manuel Guerra from Radio Red in Mexico. A question for Dr. Whitehouse and Undersecretary Novelli. There have been advances, technical advances, in oxo-biodegradable plastics. For low-value plastics, that is a main problem in emerging countries like mine or Brazil or China. Would it be a good idea to make it mandatory to have these additives of oxo-biodegradable plastics so that they don't stay in the environment but are biodegraded quickly?
Would it be advantageous if the chemicals required to make plastic biodegradable were mandated as opposed to being optional?
Yeah. You know, again, I think we need to look at a number of different solutions, and we're actually doing research right now. You know, mandatory is great. It's great to have regulations. Unless they're going to be implemented, the regulations don't really amount to much. You know, I think we're looking more at can we find market incentives, which could be waste to energy, to be able to capture and incentivize collecting and properly managing those low-value plastics. So again, I think that, you know, regulations are part of the solution set, but they can't be the only part of the solution.
Can I just add one thing to that? Totally agree with what Sandra said, but coming, as I do, from a technology background, I think we have to be very careful about mandating certain technology solutions to something, because technology is always advancing, and you don't want to freeze in place something when something better might come along. So I think we want to, if we're going to mandate things, we want to mandate results. We don't want to mandate technologies, because that will stop innovation, and that's the last thing we want to do in this area.
I'm going to take one more question. We've had a hand up. Could we mic over to my left? Mic over here, please.
Good morning, and thank you all for being here. My name is Catherine O'Day. I'm with Circular Economy Strategists right here in Rhode Island. My question would be, when you think longer term, while I agree that waste energy is an excellent solution, especially in developing economies such as Philippines and Indonesia, et cetera, as a long-term strategy that doesn't really address the issue of keeping diminishing resources in play, in cycle, through, you know, continuous circularity. Just wondered if you had any further comments on that, and if you're looking at things even now in the short term, beyond waste energy as a solution in those countries. And then I just can't help myself in addressing the question about oxy-biodegradables. Bad, bad, bad idea. They don't really totally biodegrade plastics. If they get in the recycle stream, they mess up the recyclable plastics that are in those streams. So not only should we be careful what what technologies we mandate by legislation, that one, I think, has been scientifically proven to be a really, really bad idea. But I'd really like to hear your thoughts on beyond waste energy, which I think is a starter solution and a great solution, especially when they're using it for things like biodiesel for fishing fleets. But longer term, I don't think it's the most beneficial.
I'm going to just make one little comment about the fragmentation issue, which I think you brought up, and then let Kathy talk more about the energy issue. As I showed in that slide with the zooplankton, I think we do have to be aware that even these tiny little plastic fragments, which in some cases is what happens when things break up, are designed to break up more quickly, are problems. Even though we can't see them, they're being eaten by these tiniest organisms that are then, there's going to have ripple effects up the food chain. And with respect to, the energy issue, again, it has to be economically viable. Ultimately, it would be great to have everything in a big circular economy, but we might not be able to do that right now.
Yeah, and I would agree. And I think the waste to energy is one piece of a larger thing. And so I wasn't meaning to imply that that was the only solution. I think it's one solution that can work in some places. But really, we have to put all of these pieces together. And they're going to be different things in different places. And I think the long term and the short term have to be working together. We've got to put our energy, as Sandra said, into dealing with having more things pour into the ocean while we're working on the long term, but we also got to work on the long term too. So to me, it can become, if it's economically sustainable, it can become a circular economy, but it has to be economically viable or it just isn't going to work.
I'd like to ask you all to thank the speakers for the morning. We are now going to take a 15-minute break. We will resume precisely at 10:10. Please enjoy Volvo's hospitality.
Friends from New York, from the group of SIDS countries, small island developing states. Would you mind please raise so we see that you're actually here? And this real knowledge. That you also came all the way from New York to participate in this discussion that is truly showing that ocean is not local, though the solution might be local. So I'm the ambassador for ocean from Sweden, and I just wanted to sort of talk to you about how we look at this issue and what we're actually doing from the Swedish perspective, how we work with our partners and countries, but also how we look into the particular issue on plastic and marine pollution. And lastly, I wanted to address the issue, what are the rules and responsibilities, and how do we find a way forward? Clearly, as we have been stated, ocean has no border, and we must work local for solutions. At the same time, and parallel, we need to address the issue in a global context. And we need to address this issue as well in the local, very local context. And we have heard from Sandra that the pollution comes from land and the interlinkages between land and sea. And also, if we're thinking about how many more people we will be in 2015, we're expecting 9 billion people. That is 2 billion more people. And if we still don't have the waste management in place, we can just imagine how that future will look like. And I think we had discussion, and there was a few questions earlier this morning, that the value in the ocean is drawing more and more attention. And a part of this valuation of the ocean, the marine resources, is also that we have much more and better efficient technology, as well as the financial means to go after the resources in the deep, high seas out in the seabed in the ocean, such as fishery, for example, including the sea minerals. And I think also Knut touched on a very important subject this morning, that this is really not equal distributed. Because a vast part of our ocean, which is the high seas outside the economic zones, which lies beyond sort of the natural jurisdiction. And this is sort of 50% of all the ocean, which is the high seas. This belongs to everyone, really everyone, no matter if you're a landlocked country, no matter if you've never seen the ocean, it belongs to all of us. And this also points out the important question, who owns the ocean, but who takes care of it? There is 567 different conventions for a sort of sustainable growth, because we cannot reinvent the wheel. So much effort and financial means that we put into getting this sort of sustainable economy. We need to truly learn from each other. And also, as we heard today, ocean has been seen as a big dump. And in many ways, ocean has been viewed as sort of the new frontier, the wild blue west. But this is something that we need to change, and we need to address this. At the same time, ocean has also been seen as a divider between countries. Water as a divider, it creates borders. And this is also something different. We need to see water and the ocean as a uniter. It truly unites us, and particularly the transatlantic ocean. It unites Europe with the US and shaping our partnership. And let me come back to the resources and the possibilities of seeing ocean as a resource. Just in the EU context, we are thinking 1,500,000 jobs could be created in what we call the blue sector. There's new ways of feeding this 9 billion people. 2 more billion people needs to have food. We need to have energy. And there's 2 major trends in sort of food security and the energy security. This is truly interlinked with the resources of the ocean, because most of the protein come from the ocean. And we cannot continue doing the fish and fish out all the fish from the ocean, but there's truly no protein left for the coming generations. At the same time, we have technologies, and technology is part of the solution, we heard. But technologies also need minerals, minerals that you find on the seabed. And when you're getting the seabed, you're also exploring the genetic resources on the seabed. And truly, we need more knowledge, we need more science to know where we're heading. And just as an offshore energy, there is tremendous opportunity in the vast ocean. And as we talk about trade, just to bring in another issue in the ocean context, over 90% of the trade goes on shipping on the ocean. So ocean is a big highway for many actors. But you might think, who paid tolls? And to whom would you pay the toll when you talk about the ocean? So just framing the issue and recapitalizing, because what's happened on land comes in ocean, and what happens in ocean comes back to us in the life at land. So the WWF just last week announced a new report. And this is just numbers, but it gives us sort of this visuality that we talked about that we need to understand and grab this very complex issue. And if you would sort of compare the annual gross marine product equivalent to countries' annual gross domestic product, it would be at least 2.5 trillion. So the ocean have the value of 2.5 trillion. And this would make the ocean the world's 7th largest economy in the whole world. This would be after the US, China, Japan, Germany, France, and UK. But before countries such as Brazil, Russia, and India. And we talk about investment. There was a question about investment. This is, of course, theoretical. There is values. But once you're starting to value, and you're having those numbers, you're starting to get a discussion with investors and other business opportunities. And this is quite important when we're trying to move this issue outside the purely environmental groups. Because the environmental people, they already know. We know we need to do something. And just another comparison is a total asset of the ocean is at least conservatively estimated to be $24 trillion US. And this would be the world's largest sovereign wealth fund after Norway and Abu Dhabi and Saudi Arabia, for example. Just to show you another example, and when we put the value on ocean in monetary terms, we can talk in a different language to the people we want to target in the financial sector. At the same time, as we talk about those tremendous resources and valuation of the marine resources, we also see a different map taking shape. And the World Bank just launched another report last week. There's a lot of reports launching about the ocean, which clearly says that Seychelles, that I know that we have a representative from here today, they have approximately 500 square kilometers in land. But if you would calculate the economic zone of Seychelles, it would be 1.3 million square kilometers. And if you can see this sort of land or space as a resource for your future economy, you have a totally different mindset. And just in Europe, if you look at the map, I think most of us know how it looks like. Countries like Portugal and Norway would be the biggest or the largest countries. I'm not sure what the other countries in Europe would say about that, but of course it's a tremendous opportunity to go after those resources. And that's why, from the Swedish point of view, we want to make sure this is done in a sustainable way. It's not about conservation or exploding, it's about how could you do this in a joint action. And coming back to the issue of marine pollution, And I think marine pollution is clearly a sign what's going on, not only in the world, but also the status of the ocean. And Sandra mentioned before that 80% come from the land, connecting land and sea. 1 ton plastic, 3 ton fish, 50% end up at the shore. This is tremendous numbers that give us a perspective. But also, add into this picture that we have a growing economies, more people, and there's still no waste management in place in many of those economies. So how do we combat marine pollution? What could we actually do about it? And we can talk about marine debris, which is, as the sailors brought up here, things that you can see on the surface. But often, as you know in life, it's under the surface where things are going on. And a part of this is also the microplastic. And in our country, we might not have a problem, we think, with the marine debris. But we have a tremendous problem with the microplastic as well. Because they break down and it stays in the ecosystems. And it's really hard to get away. And for example, we have microplastic in the cosmetic products and in household chemicals in order to provide the scrubbing functions. And we also have textile fleece materials during washing that significantly comes out, the fiber comes out in the sewage water. So this is a particular problem in the wastewater management. And we also have the plastic particles from tires, and they comes out in the stormwater system. And if we don't clean the stormwater system, it comes out in the ocean. In our ocean, in our backwater, it's the Baltic Sea, and this is a tremendous problem. So the sewage treatment plants still have no special purification method that can actually cure and capture those tiny plastics. So we need to target the problems from many different ways and from many different resources. And in Sweden, we are just working with the Swedish Environmental Protection Agency to identify where this pollution really comes from, to capture the source, to capture the problem where it is, and then try to prevent it comes out in the ocean. We also work on waste disposal on land, and we heard this 4 Rs, the reduce, reuse, and recycle, which is a tremendous opportunity as well. We have the fishing gears that not only lost in the ocean, because the fishing gears also, the fishing net continue to fishing the fish. So it's sort of ghost fishing nets, which is a tremendous problem that you can recycle and reuse. But also think about the fish that is captured under those years is floating around. We also have, of course, problems coming from the ship at sea that we work with, as well as the microplastic reaching the sewage water. And we also work with the Swedish Chemical Agency to create an action plan for toxic-free living. And this is not always about plastic, because you have to grab the toxic environment as a package. But we are now, actually, as we speak, considering a legislative action to phase out the microplastic in cosmetic products. And also, furthermore, increase ambition to manage the microplastic in wastewater treatment plants. So that's on the national level. If we move into the regional level, what we can do in our backwaters, we are a part of something called the Northeast Atlantic OSPAR Convention. And we have been working very strongly as an active part in this convention to really phase out plastic. And we have a particular action plan that we work with the private sector and other stakeholders to really grab this tremendous problem. And then, of course, to implement this in the different states that are part of this regional convention. We also have the EU context that we work, of course, as a strong country in the EU. We have to work through the Marine Directive. And in this Marine Directive, which is legislative binding, we work with plastic and marine debris. But truly, we can work on our national level, the regional level. And once again, we brought up the global level and what's happening in the UN context. And obviously, UN is a platform for decision-making for all countries in this global context, which is quite important. And Catherine Novelli brought up the post-2015 agenda. We are now having 17 goals, one of them being focused on ocean. And once you have the goal, you have the indicators and targets. And one of the targets is particularly focusing on plastic. And it says, by 2025, we should prevent and significantly reduce the marine pollution of all kinds, and in particular, the land-based activities, including marine debris and nutrition pollution. And now is an ongoing discussion for the next coming year on how do we get the indicators under those targets. And Sweden as a government, and a particularly strong country in the UN context, we strongly focus on how could we actually implement this. Because it's one thing to have those global framework, but how do you go about to make sure you implement it, and also have the financial means to countries and actors that might not be so fortunate yet. So in terms of coming back to ocean health, we have this blue growth agenda, putting a value on the ocean, seeing the value. Because if you value and treasure something, you don't throw it away. So this is an important strategy for us. Another part of this, or a parallel process, is something that we called natural accounting, putting a value of nature in itself. And in Sweden, we just had a bill, which is a Swedish strategy for biodiversity and ecosystem services. And this means value the nature and the services that it has. And this is something that we work on strongly. My third part, and which is the last part, is that governments cannot do it alone. Obviously, governments have their restrictions. We are not creative. We're not dynamic. We have the private sector. And we need to utilize these tremendous resources for innovations. At the same time, you also have multinational companies working on a global level that has no borders. And those can take decisions to tomorrow and change their supply chains, such as phasing out microplastic, or take any initiative that could really have an impact. And I think from a government perspective, working with the private sector and just showing us why we're here today, having a platform that we could get actions together could really moving this agenda forward. So seeing the different roles and responsibility is quite important. And I think we also heard in the beginning what was mentioning the importance of visuality and showing and communicating this sort of context and how it's linked together. And better public understanding of the ocean is an important part of resolving this complex and critical issue. And people are just not aware of the massive role the ocean plays in the Earth system. While the public generally has limited understanding of the ocean, the more people know, the more they're willing to support policies. So we have to have an educational aspects. So this is really why Sweden has initiated this dialogue, and we will continue this discussion in Gothenburg, where the final stop will be the 26th of June. And what we have created is a platform for change. And this is a platform to truly tell the story, what's going on in the ocean, and we are all in it. Thank you.
Ambassador.
Thank you.
Wonderful. It's great to learn about another comprehensive approach like that, Ambassador, and thank you very much for your remarks. It's now my great pleasure to introduce the governor of the state of Rhode Island and Providence Plantations, Gina Raimondo. Governor Raimondo understands that a clean Narragansett Bay is one of Rhode Island's greatest economic assets and has supported a wide range of initiatives to strengthen our commitment to water quality and debris removal. Please welcome Rhode Island's Chief Executive and first female governor, Gina Raimondo. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning, and welcome to the Ocean State. Very happy to have you all here. This has been a fantastic stopover, and I am so proud of all the people who have made the Volvo race so successful here in Newport. We had a wonderful dinner last night, and I think this has gone off without a hitch. So thank you to all of you who have participated. I know Senator Whitehouse was here earlier. I wanted to thank him and recognize him, and the mayor of Newport, Jim Marie Napolitano, the head of DEM, Janet Coit, part of my team. Thank you all for being here, and thank you, Ambassador, for your time and for your fantastic comments. I feel very fortunate to be the governor of Rhode Island because the ocean and Narragansett Bay is so core and central to Rhode Island's culture, to our economy, to our way of life, that our citizens are extraordinarily supportive of preservation efforts. And in a way that makes it easy for leaders like me to respond to the call of the ocean, if you will. And so with that, I think we have an even greater responsibility to answer that call and preserve Rhode Island's greatest natural resource. Given our size, no Rhode Islander is very far away from the ocean. We have over 400 miles of coastline, and we're the smallest state in America. So it really, truly is our prized possession. And Janet Coit, who's in the front row here, who runs DEM for me, Department of Environmental Management, recently shared a story with me about her former boss, the late and great Senator John Chafee. And I think many of you in this room had the opportunity to work with Senator Chafee, who was an unbelievable champion for the Bay, and we're still grateful to his work. In any event, he was here in 1986 waiting for a boat that had also raced around the world. And of course, this was not the Volvo, but the sailor in that case was a fellow named Mark Schrader. And the senator was waiting here in the summer of '86 for Mark to arrive into Newport. And Mark had sailed the world alone, which is a remarkable feat, unbelievable to me, actually. But what was just as remarkable is what trailed behind Mark. And what trailed behind him was a trail of plastic waste. A trail of plastic waste. And it was waste that Mark had collected in the most remote corners of the ocean. And he had it behind him, and it became clear to Senator Chafee that this disturbingly massive haul of marine debris wasn't just a sailor's problem, it's all of our problem. And if I could impart one message today, it's that. It's all of our problem, and therefore we all have a role to play in the solution of eliminating marine and ocean debris. And Senator John Chafee helped Rhode Island lead the charge to tackle pollution. He was the first member of Congress to introduce legislation to combat plastic pollution. And he also helped adopt an international treaty which required all nations to eliminate the widespread disposal of plastic at sea. And I'm very proud of the fact that Rhode Island does have a long history of public leaders such as Senator Chafee and prior governors, Senator Whitehouse, who was here earlier, all of whom are committed to making sure that the ocean and our bay is clean. And we have done a remarkable job. I mean, if you think, I see Jonathan Stone from Save the Bay in the back, if you think of the condition of Narragansett Bay today relative to even 15, 20 years ago, it's amazing. Amazing the work that you and other organizations have done. And of course, the work isn't done, but it's a great deal for you to be proud of. And I think Rhode Island is a leader. The statistics bear out the fact that we are a leader in the work that we're doing to keep the bay clean. Pollution comes in many forms, as you know, and I think it's important to recognize that some forms are not as visible or as obvious as others. Certainly the mound of plastic trash being hauled behind the boat is obvious, but others are not as obvious, but nonetheless we need to keep our eye on it. Forms that are harder to recognize are pollution from combined sewage overflow. Pollution from combined sewage overflow releases 2.2 billion gallons of untreated sewage annually into the bay and its tributaries. The dump of raw sewage happens after, as you know, happens after large rainfalls, and with more intense storms associated with the changing climate, the problem becomes more challenging. Stormwater treatment is vital, and we need to do a much better job. And, you know, we are committed to doing that here. And then, of course, often pollution's hard to miss. Every year, Rhode Island participates in a program called the International Coastal Cleanup. I'm very happy to say in 2013, volunteers removed over 87,000 pieces of trash from the water. That's about 12,000 pounds of trash. And that's a lot. But thankfully, that's 12,000 pounds of trash that aren't in the water anymore. In fact, just this past April, over 2,000 pounds of trash was removed from Fort Adams State Park alone, right here, Fort Adams State Park. So again, as governor, I am so grateful to have a coalition of grassroots organizations, nonprofit organizations here in Rhode Island, and volunteers dedicated to that cleanup. I also want to say, and I agree with the ambassador, business has a role to play. Combating pollution and dealing with debris must be done in a collaborative fashion between the government, federal and state, and municipal, grassroots nonprofit entities that I've spoken about, but also the private sector. Private sector, as you say, is dynamic, is innovative, has a lot at stake. We all have a lot at stake here to preserve the ocean and the bay. And the for-profit community has a huge role to play. Businesses in Rhode Island, I have to say, our marine trades in Rhode Island have been at the forefront of environmental issues. And I noticed that there are several members here from the Marine Trade Association, and I have to thank you deeply for your work. You're amazing. And we have to keep going, the marine trades. It's remarkable. In 2006, the Rhode Island Marine Trade Association started the first shrink wrap recycling program, and to date has recycled over 100,000 pounds of shrink wrap. That's fantastic. And our environment is stronger, but frankly our economy is stronger because of your efforts. You know, we could have a whole other discussion on the economic value of the ocean and the bay to Rhode Island. And in order to unleash that value, it's got to be clean. So thank you to the marine trades for your effort. Clearly there's much more work to be done. I just want to cite a few examples of some of the things that we are doing here in Rhode Island, most of which are collaborative efforts between government, the private sector, and the nonprofit sector. And I thought it would be useful to just briefly tick off a few things that we are doing that I think are very successful. First, a local organization, and I think some of you may be here, called Clean Bays. Clean Bays has begun removing old pilings in the upper bay. Exactly what we need to do. And thanks to 11th Hour Racing, Clean Bays was able to demonstrate a new technology and expand its impressive work to remove debris from Rhode Island waters. Focus on a particular part of the bay, focus on a particular technology. Thank you for your initiative. Another thing I wanted to mention, I have proposed, and I'm working with the local General Assembly now to create an infrastructure bank in the state of Rhode Island, to make sure that we have adequate funding for stormwater treatment. We need to make sure that we have capital available to do wastewater treatment and stormwater treatment. And I have proposed and have confidence that we'll be able to get this passed in this legislative session, an infrastructure bank, you might call it a green bank, to provide public capital as well as private capital. We're going to have a coalition of banks to come together to do lending in order to make sure that we have the money available to properly treat our stormwater. You know, every year in Rhode Island we have beach closures. Every year beach closures. It's unacceptable. We're the ocean state. The beaches need to be open. In order for the beaches to be open, we have to treat our stormwater properly. We're doing a good job. We need to do better. That takes capital, and so I've proposed this infrastructure bank, and Rhode Island will be a real leader in stormwater treatment if we can make more capital available. And lastly, our state's Department of Environmental Management, again led by Director Coyd, who is a fantastic and dedicated leader, partnered with 11th Hour Racing and other members of the Sustainability Committee to make this stopover an environmental leader in this race. I have to say, it gives me great pride to see all the boxed water. I think it's wonderful. And if you walk around, you're not going to see empty Poland Springs bottles littered all over the camp. And that's the way it should be. It's an important statement. And more than that, it's a real contribution to sustainability. We're promoting the use of alternative transportation, bicycles primarily, diverting 60% of the event's waste through composting and recycling, 60%. It's a big number. And using low-emission biodiesel in the generators to power the race village. So all of this adds up. No one of these initiatives, no one of these organizations is going to make the difference. but in combination, over time, will make the difference. And that's really what we need to remind ourselves of today. You know, in a couple of days, the sailors will take off again on the next leg of their journey. Unless, of course, some want to stay. I was at dinner last night. Knut mentioned to me that his daughter, who's 6 years old, has decided to enroll at St. Michael's School in Newport. So I have my fingers crossed that they might actually not leave Rhode Island. So those of you who want to stay, you are more than welcome to stay. Those of you who want to start a business, you are absolutely more welcome to do that. And I'll talk to you later. But the reality is most of you will be taking off at the end of the weekend. And we, again, have been delighted to host you. But when the race ends, we can't let our dedication to sustainability, removal of debris, and clean oceans and clean bays end. We have to use this as an opportunity to rededicate ourselves to the effort, to become more collaborative, more innovative, look for ways to engage the private sector with the public sector, with the nonprofit sector, look for more creative financing, and fundamentally at our core recognize it's in everybody's interest, every person, every family, every business, every political leader, everybody's interest to make sure that we have a clean ocean, clean waters, clean bay, and a sustainable future for the next generation. So I know I'm leaving here fired up to continue on my mission, and am committing to redouble my efforts and redouble my dedication to sustainability and clean water. And I can't thank you all enough for being here and for your participation this morning. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Governor. It's a real pleasure. It's a real pleasure to have a governor who does not need to be convinced of these issues. She's a leader on these issues. She's urging all of us forward to do better. And thank you so much for your work. I really appreciate that. And as a side note, the water boxes you mentioned, by the way, are gifts. Please take them with you. They are refillable. There are water filling stations, the blue barrels you see all over the park. So please enjoy them. We're hoping to start a new trend at this event. It's now my pleasure to introduce Wendy Schmidt, the president of the Schmidt Family Foundation, where she works to advance the development of renewable energy and the wiser use of natural resources. Here in Rhode Island, her work in combination with Clean Bays and 11th Hour Racing was really the spark plug that got that major cleanup in East Providence started, that early investment from philanthropy. And so the focus here is what is philanthropy's role in sparking new changes and moving people along, perhaps taking some risks, as she has done with the Ocean X Prize and trying to find new technology. Really excited to welcome back to Rhode Island Wendy Schmidt. Wendy.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. What a beautiful facility. Who can believe this went up in such a short amount of time? Somebody said it should stay here. I agree. It's really a beautiful place. I want to thank the Volvo Ocean Race team and also Sail Newport for having me here today and for hosting this very important discussion. One of the great things about going second to last is, for those of you who might be bored, the finish line is in sight. I also have heard a lot of things already that I would like to say myself, so I won't repeat a lot of it. Basically, people have said this morning that we've got to pay attention, which I agree with. We need to communicate the story really well. And I think if you saw that film early today, you understand what the power of visualization is. That is what allows people to respond. And I'm basically here to talk to you today about the philanthropic response to the ocean issues that we've been discussing. The Schmidt Family Foundation's 11th Hour project looks for connections. That's really what we do. Our background is in Silicon Valley, in networking technology, and we look at the world's issues in a very interconnected way, using information technology as kind of our background. So in recent years, my husband Eric and I have turned a lot of attention to the health of the oceans, gathering data, sharing it, trying to understand it and communicate about it, and look for ways to help. You know, somebody once said that we know more about the backside of the moon than we do the bottom of the ocean. And that's still unfortunately true. We do a lot of work with mapping of the bottom of the ocean. We have a research vessel named Falkor, 272-foot-long ship that was launched out of Hamburg in 2012. And this boat has been traveling all over the world, bringing science teams aboard so they can pursue their research. And in exchange for the boat time, we ask those teams to share their data in real time and transparently, and to actively do this so that we can advance the pace of scientific research at a time when the oceans are under attack in all the ways that you've been hearing about. There's also some large-scale work that we're doing with the X Prize Foundation. Right now we're in the final phase next week in Honolulu of an Ocean Health X Prize where we have a competition to develop accurate, affordable, portable, durable, commercial ocean pH data monitors and sensors that will replace today's existing very expensive and cumbersome technology. This will help us everywhere to better understand the acidification process that is now threatening the life forms in the seas that are at the bottom of our food chain. But there are also smaller and local projects that we have been supporting that are equally important because, as you've heard this morning, when you can successfully address a local manifestation of a problem, or provide an opportunity to see where the solution might be, you can often scale that. So what is the 11th Hour Project? Again, you heard that we promote a fuller understanding of the impact of human activities on the interdependent living systems of the planet. We look at energy, we look at food systems, water systems, and where human rights comes into that picture. Part of that 11th Hour program is the racing team that's based here in Newport. And we work with the sailors, with the maritime community to promote collaborative systemic change for the health of the marine environment. And you might have heard from Charlie Enright this morning. He's one of our ambassadors. There are other Volvo ocean racers who are also ambassadors now, and they're fantastic spokespeople, really. They're on the front lines, they're witnessing, they're telling the stories, and they've become some of our greatest allies. We've also been working directly with Sail Newport to integrate environmentally responsible practices here at this Volvo stopover, the first of many, we hope, and also to expand opportunities for education through the exploration zone, if you've had a chance to stop and see that. There will be a new Sail Newport building that we're helping them to build that will teach sailing students through its design and materials and its operations how to think about sustainability on and off the water. We've also been very excited to partner with some groups here and see real progress in the cleanup efforts of marine debris. Just to look at the big picture for a moment, I think everybody will agree that the human exploitation of natural resources and the resultant pollution has never been good for the Earth. But it's really in the last half century that what was a slowly lapping wave has turned into a tsunami. There were only 2 billion people on the Earth when my mother was born in 1931. And you can actually imagine, no matter how much emissions they produced, no matter how much pollution, it really couldn't impact the planet at scale. It could affect local regions. But today, with more than 7 billion of us, and an ever-growing proportion of those people accessing electricity and commanding raw materials for buildings and clothing and food and transportation, our demands on the living systems of the Earth are really beginning to outstrip its ability to supply our needs and to recover and to find any balance for the future. If you read Annie Leonard, who wrote The Story of Stuff, she'll tell you that if everyone on the planet lived like Americans live, we would need 4.6 planets today. And you've heard about this morning how we're filling the planet with garbage. Sandra's really wonderful talk made that really clear. What I think about is how far beyond our biomass we demand resources, right? We're outmassed by ants, and look at the human footprint. So I believe the challenge of the industrial production and consumption pattern that we have instituted is nowhere more critical than when we look at the oceans. where already 90% of the big fish are gone. And we are challenging the chemistry of the oceans with our atmospheric pollution and making the whole environment less hospitable for all kinds of creatures, the microorganisms that have evolved at the bottom of the food chain for millions of years. So I think Catherine mentioned to you about half of the oxygen we breathe is coming from the ocean. I was going to ask you to do something. Maybe you'll do it with me. It's kind of fun. Take a breath. Let your breath out. Good. Let's do one more. Take another breath. Deep cleansing breath. Okay, out you go. So I do that to tell you that let's try skipping every other breath. Because one of those breaths came from the ocean. Greater than any rainforest on the planet. We are deeply, deeply connected. And did you know that 2 billion people on the planet get their primary protein from the oceans? Or that 3 billion every year depend on the oceans for their livelihood? That's how connected we are. The senator said how much we have to learn about our connections to the ocean. He's absolutely right. I grew up in New Jersey, and I really didn't have any idea that I was connected to the ocean. We would visit, get sandy and sunburned, and go home. We fly over the oceans, right? We take ferry boats across waterways, but we don't really make any connection. And without that personal connection, right, without that collective attention to what is really at stake here, our descendants are likely to live in a really much depleted world. Here in Rhode Island in 2011, NOAA, the National Ocean and Atmospheric Administration, placed Narragansett Bay in the top 20 most contaminated bays in the country. A report from Environment Rhode Island Research and Policy Center noted the presence of heavy metals, including arsenic, mercury, and lead, as well as excessive quantities of nitrogen and phosphorus that have found their way into the water as a result of failing septic systems and inadequate wastewater treatment and agricultural and urban runoff. These excess nutrients, of course, can cause algae blooms and deprive fish of oxygen, which leads to die-offs of fish and clams, hurting the economy. There's also leaking oil when barges accidentally sink. I read up to 400 metric tons of oil actually enter the bay each year. There's also just plain old junk from long-gone industries. Up the bay in the Seekonk River, facing East Providence, you can see wood sticking out of the water. These are ribs of old shipwrecks and frames of abandoned barges and pilings above and below the water, some of them 100 years old. One reporter who went to the scene described it underwater as looking like pickup sticks. So this is not only a waterfront blight in an area that's trying to undergo redevelopment and revitalization, but it's actually a danger to paddlers and sailors and rowers and fishermen. So back in 2013, 11th Hour Racing stepped in, and we gave a small $5,000 grant to URI's School of Oceanography so they could complete a sonar scan of East Providence waterfront to better understand the amount and type of debris littering the bottom. Well, there was a lot. The scan identified 328 tons of marine debris just in that location. Then in 2014, 11th Hour Racing gave a grant of $50,000 to Clean Bays. You heard about them earlier. They began the cleanup effort, removing more than 8 tons of debris, including 125 pilings. 25% of what they picked up was actually able to be reharvested into new building materials. The story keeps getting better. This year, Clean Bays continued the cleanup with a $45,000 grant from us. And because of our early investment and those outcomes, which were recognized, the project has now been matched with a $200,000 federal grant and $87,000 from Rhode Island's Department of Environmental Management. What's the lesson for us? We believe that small strategic investments from well-thought-out philanthropy can serve as a catalyst for much larger projects with much greater investment from the agencies and organizations who have the ultimate responsibility for public and environmental well-being. So it's clear to me, you've heard this before, there's a role for all of us in this solution, because we really are reaching a critical point in the human relationship with the oceans, and we cannot afford to ignore the information that we're getting. We're getting it every day, but we're fortunate also to live at a time when we can show and share and communicate about the world in ways never possible before. On Falkor, we take high-resolution cameras and very advanced sonar tools down to map the bottom. We can show people in streaming real-time pictures what's going on. The dynamic graphical interfaces that have been developed today can bring to life issues that were once abstractions. Look at the difference that we all feel having cameras on the Volvo ocean racing boats. Our cell phones and social media networks connect us with an immediacy never before known in human history. And we can't really say we didn't know what we were doing, as you could have said 50 years ago. I don't think people did know, honestly, but today it's just too easy to find out. So the promise we have before us now from a technology standpoint is that we can reimagine the way we make things, the way we power our world. We can build a regenerative economy, a circular economy, one that is very different from creating things leading to waste all over the natural world. This is what I'm trying to work for. It's what I believe in and what we work for at 11th Hour. Here in Pawtucket, you have a national historical landmark. It's a wooden building constructed in 1792. And it's the first place in the United States where cotton was manufactured by water power. Slater Mill. It's called the birthplace of the American Industrial Revolution. So innovation lives here. It's somewhere with your universities and your creatives, your turf and your toys. Maybe this is the time to finish the cleanup and start to take a lead in the next industrial revolution. You know, I like to think about future generations looking back at us, and they'll have, one way or another, a view of us. And they'll either look back and they'll hate us because we didn't have the courage to act and to make the world a better place. Or they might look back at us and love us. They might look back at us and thank us for doing nothing less than saving their world for them. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. In our little jurisdiction of Rhode Island, the 11th Hour Racing program has made a tremendous difference in many areas, and I think that's a great example of how philanthropy and business and government can work together. Not just one more speaker to go, there are actually two more speakers, and as you can tell, because we took a little too long break, we're running a little late. So our two remaining speakers both come to us from the context of business. First, in what one business can do to advise other businesses, and finally, what one large business and a co-sponsor of the SCA is doing in the world of sustainability. But we will wrap at around 11:15, so we just have to move a little bit more quickly, and we will not have time for a lot of Q&A at the end, if any, but that's the plight of taking a longer break. Our first business leader is Daniel Wild, the head of sustainability investing, research, and development of Robeco-Sam. Mr. Wild's innovative approach could be part of the answer as the world struggles with developing more effective waste management and source reduction strategies. Please welcome Daniel Wild.
Thank you. Yeah, good morning, everybody. It's a big pleasure for me to be here today, not just because I think it's a really important and great topic that was chosen for this summit. Also, I believe it's an honor for me to be here as a Swiss person. We don't even have an ocean, we don't have a shoreline, but I'm speaking at an ocean summit. Quite interesting. But I hope that recognizing that a couple of years back we won the America's Cup shows you that we do have some exposures to the oceans. Or maybe more importantly, we have had to learn very early what it means to live in a very constrained place. So the pollution we create immediately becomes visible for everybody. That's maybe because already in the 80s we put the complete ban on landfills. I'm not sure if that's applicable everywhere, but it has definitely helped. So the pictures we have seen this morning, I think, are a clear indicator that we have to expand the boundaries and look at the whole global world as one system, where the pollution finally falls back on ourselves. And if we look at the development of the waste production globally, we also see that the huge problems are actually not here now, they're even ahead of us. We currently produce about 4 million tons of waste every single day globally. If we continue like now, we will increase by a factor of 4 within this century. And you see here different models, different assumptions, but even the most optimistic and positive models lead to a factor of 2, 3 or more in waste production. So that maybe shows also a little bit that we won't solve that problem without involving the big corporates, without involving the corporates globally. We have to do bottom-up measures, of course, solutions here and there. We have heard many of those today, but as long as we don't work with the big economy to solve these issues, we won't solve them. And I'm standing here today as an asset manager. So why asset management? Well, we are looking at corporates to figure out where we want to make investments. And already 20 years back when we started, we were of the opinion that companies which better manage environmental, social, and corporate governance issues, these will be the winners of the future. And as investors, we are investing for the future, so we want to find these companies. That's why we have developed our methodology, which also leads to the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, to address globally corporates and their sustainability behavior. That means we have to understand these trends first, but we also have to understand the industries in which these companies operate, the competitive environment in which they operate, and finally, we have to understand the business of a single company and the financial implications that are there. Only then we have a full picture and can use these findings to make investments in whatever financial strategies you want to choose from, passive, active, and so on. So our assessment currently covers 3,000 corporates globally, the largest companies in the world. We organize the assessment in questionnaires, but we also look at their policies, at their measures they put into place, at how they develop products, the whole product life cycle, and so on. That gives us a huge database, which now fills about 15 years of data already, and allows us to draw many conclusions and comparison across the board. Per company, we have about 600 data points, which are then grouped in criteria, in questions, or you can even aggregate that in a total sustainability score for a company. Companies increasingly do realize that this is material. That's also proven by the fact that more and more companies participate actively in our assessment, knowing that it takes 200 to 300 hours to fill in our questionnaires. So that's not a small exercise. This is actually a huge collection of information on a global basis. For the companies which do not participate, we collect the information based on publicly available information. For all the companies, we can create then a heat map or a tree map, as we call it, if you want, which indicates from an E, S, and G perspective where the company's strengths and weaknesses are. This is just an example of a company which is also present today in the room, but I'm not going to say which one it is, because we regard this as confidential information. The companies use it internally to improve, to create projects and improve their performance. Let me instead show a few results of the assessment when it comes to waste management. First of all, on the left-hand side, you see that a large portion of companies globally still do not even report on their waste management and waste production. It's about 20% in Europe which don't report, but more than 50% in the US which are not aware exactly of what's going on. On the right-hand side, then you see the scores, so kind of the grade we give to these companies which do report. And there we see the full range of results. So there's really a lot of companies which still have potential to catch up with the leaders in their respective sectors. If we then look at corporate waste management in detail, the same picture in Japan and Europe, a lot of companies do report on waste itself, but already setting a target and moving towards that target is only 1/3 or 1/4 of the companies which do report. Again, I think we all can catch up, also in Europe, but particularly since I'm standing here in the US, I think there is a lot more that can be done. And knowing that 39% of American people live in counties with a shoreline, I think the exposure is still very high. We do recognize that an increasing number of companies are aware of these issues, and actually we even believe that they are leading the field. So I usually ask, can we tell the companies to do more by forcing the investors to force the companies, but maybe it's even the other way around. Maybe the companies have to lead the way and show to investors, not just their financial numbers, but also show what's actually more important in a long-term strategy for the companies in terms of risks and opportunities. We can see that because the majority of companies at least report in some form on sustainability, but only a minority of huge pension plans or investors today know actually what's going on with the sustainability of their investments. And that's why we believe we have to talk more about that. We have to be transparent and bring the investors and the corporates together to tell financial analysts and the world what is important for the long-term success of a company. You may know the UNPRI, the United Nations Principles for Responsible Investment, an organization since 2006 where investors commit. They have now 1,400 signatories which are committed to do more, and more than $40 trillion are behind these investors. So if we all work together, I think it's actually a win-win-win situation for the planet, for investors, and for the corporates, and we can solve it, absolutely sure. Thanks for your attention. I hope I did not use too many minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Wild. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
And now our final speaker. We're going to hear from Kjersti Strandqvist, the Senior Vice President for Sustainability at SCA. Ms. Strandqvist has a background in both chemical engineering and marketing and leads sustainability efforts at SCA, which I'm sure you all know is a global personal hygiene and forest products company. Please welcome Kjersti. Okay.
Thank you so much for welcoming me here, and I guess I'm the last person then for 3 minutes. Anyway, I will try to do my best. I will not tell the story about the company because I'm inviting all of you next door. We have the beautiful pavilion there. We have lots of fantastic employees to tell you everything about the company, so please join us there. SCA has been around since 1673. This means that we believe we have been able to grow successfully over all of these years. And of course, this means that we need to have a thorough understanding of the environment and of the society where we live. And we plan to be around at least another 300 years. This means that we really do want to take a role, not only in this, but in everything concerning sustainability. I'd just like to briefly come back to the point about reduce, reuse, and recycle. So if you look at the company responsibility, and just look at the root cause of everything you find in the ocean. Basically, it comes from the industry, of course. We produce this stuff. So everything we can do as a company to minimize resource utilization, cleverly design the products so that they can be recycled or reused is beneficial, of course. This is where we as an industry must and want to take a role in all of this. If you look at the work that we do as a company, we are striving for zero waste in our production facilities, and by that, taking out everything that goes to landfill. We're wanting to upcycle the waste that we create in our supply streams, which means that we can bring it up, we can use it for other products, and sometimes sell it onwards to another industry, making money on this. So listening to all of that, this makes proper business sense as well. One last example is that we use a lot of recycled fiber to produce our tissue products. You will find examples of that in all the toilets around here under the brand name Tork. In that recycled stream that we bring into our factories, we find lots of stuff. Now, some of it we use, the paper fiber, we can reuse and make new tissue. The rest of it we can either sell off. It can be made into park benches, for example, outdoor furniture. So if you're just cleverly using your innovative mind, there's lots of things that can be done with this. And I think here, we've heard some examples, but we as a company certainly do play a role in all of this. So I would like to introduce one of the sailors in our team, Dee Kafari, for just a couple of minutes of summing up her views. Dee has been sailing around the world with a team and on her own several times. So just some final comments on what you find on this topic.
Thank you. As one of the sailors with Team SCA, I'm very pleased that I've spent the last 10 years having the ocean as my workplace. And I've covered a fair few miles, but what saddens me is the amount of waste that I've seen increase in my playground. And if I use some of the examples from just this edition of the Volvo Ocean Race, it is quite shocking. When we came through the Malacca Straits, we saw numerous volumes of polystyrene. Now, this is floating, this is made by us, used by us, and we can't dispose of it. And every flat screen TV looked like it had been unpacked in the Malacca Straits. We saw all the packaging en route. And another sad tale we had was from the Southern Ocean. One of the things the sailors absolutely love about sailing in the oceans is being at one with nature. We talk about the whales, we talk about beluga whales in the bay here, seen last weekend. We talk about seeing the fish, the birds in their environment. And we were there in the Southern Ocean commenting with excitement that we could see seals. One of the girls was up the rig, I can see a seal, it's amazing. So we're all there with the binoculars. And the sad thing was that seal was playing with a plastic bag. And that's all our products that we're putting in the ocean as humans. And it is really sad. And when we're sailing, we are talking about finite resources. We're thinking about no waste. We're talking about recycling. We're talking about reducing everything that I've heard mentioned this morning. And we're doing exactly the same. We don't want to carry extra weight. We don't want to produce lots of rubbish. And we want to use every single thing we put on that boat. So we're trying to minimize everything. We're trying to reduce all the packaging. And we really do spend time trying to do that. And it's when you come out of the environment where we're talking small details, small grams of weight where we're looking, and we come back ashore and we suddenly realize what a wasteful society we are, how much excess we run, how much packaging there is to everything. And I think we should take some of the lessons that we use as sailors to try and minimize what we use, what we carry, how we use stuff, bring it ashore, and I think we'll have a much better environment. And it's great to be able to join you here just shortly and support the ideas and the philosophy that I'm hearing in this room. If we can educate now, I think the future and our oceans will be a really good place that hopefully I can spend another 10 years enjoying. Thank you.
Thank you, Dee. Well, thank you, everyone, and welcome to the SCA Pavilion.
Appreciate it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we began and ended the morning with compelling evidence presented by Volvo sailors. We know this much. The explosion of marine debris in the world's oceans cannot continue without serious consequences for the health of the planet's oceans. This is a problem that we have created in the last 50 years. And if we commit to it, we can solve it in a lot quicker than 50 years. I'd like to set 15 years as a goal. It's possible if everyone in this room contributes to the solution, if every sector we have brought to the table today contributes. The sailors have given us a call to action, and I think we ignore it at our own peril. I hope, Knut, if this great race stops here again in 3 years, we can update. We can have some accountability. We can say, what have we done from each one of those sectors to stop that alarming curve going upward of an increase in marine debris? I'd like to cut that short, stop it, and do all we can to stop the further introduction of marine debris into the world's oceans. Thank you all for a great morning. I want to thank my new friends at Volvo, all the divisions, my old friends at Sail Newport, the Swedish Ministry of Foreign Affairs, everyone who contributed to making this event come together. I think it was an enormously rewarding use of our time to get this issue on the plate and take advantage of the fact that these famous, fearless sailors are bringing to our attention that we're making a mess of this planet, and it's up to us to do something differently today. Thank you all so much for coming.